What if Allah never forgives me? Sit with that for a second. Feel it, chest. Maybe you have whispered it to yourself at 3 in the morning when the house was silent and your sins were louder than your heartbeat. Maybe you have said it after a prayer you rushed through, or after a mistake you swore you would never repeat but repeated anyway. That question is not weakness. That question is the beginning of the most important journey a human being can take. And before this ends, you will understand why the very fact that you are asking it is proof that you are not who you think you are. There is a version of you that exists only in your own mind, a version built entirely out of shame. This version replays your worst nights on a loop, remembers every broken promise, every time you said you would change and didn't, every time you looked in the mirror and could not stand what you saw. That version of you has become a judge, and it has already delivered a verdict. 2. Gone. But here is the first thing you need to hear, and I need you to actually let it land instead of just reading past it. That judge is not Allah. That judge is your own fear wearing the mask of certainty. Fear is a liar that sounds like truth when it speaks softly enough, and it has been speaking to you for years. Think about someone in your life who never gave up on you. Maybe a mother who kept a plate of food warm long after midnight, not knowing if you were safe, not knowing if you would even come home changed or the same. Maybe a friend who kept calling after you had gone silent for weeks. Now ask yourself something honest. If a flawed human being, someone with their own wounds and limitations, someone who gets tired and hurt and impatient, can still choose to love you through your worst chapters, what does that tell you about a creator whose mercy was described as vast enough to swallow every ocean of sin a person could ever commit? You are measuring the infinite by the ruler of your own guilt, and that ruler was never built to measure something that large. Let me take you somewhere where most people never go in their own mind, because it is uncomfortable, because it forces you to look directly at the thing you have been avoiding. Picture the exact moment you did the thing you are most ashamed of. Not the polished version you tell people, the real one. The one only you and the walls of that room know about. Feel the weight of it again for just a second. Now here is the twist nobody prepares you for. That moment was never the end of your story. It was the exact moment your story could have started, if only you had known that guilt was never designed to bury you. Guilt was designed to wake you up. Pain that makes you sit up at night is not punishment. It is signal. It means the part of you that still wants better has not died. People who have truly lost themselves do not feel guilty anymore. The fact that you are still aching over what you did means something inside you is still alive and still fighting. There is a strange comfort that comes from giving up on yourself. It feels almost peaceful in a hollow way. If you decide you are already ruined, you no longer have to try. You no longer have to face the exhausting work of becoming someone better, because you have already written the ending. That is the real danger, not the sin itself, but the surrender that follows it. The quiet decision to stop believing change is possible for someone like you. That surrender is the actual trap, far more dangerous than any single mistake you have made, because a mistake is a moment, but surrender is a direction, and direction determines destination. Now I want you to think about discipline for a moment, because most people separate faith and discipline as if they live in two different rooms, but they do not. They are same muscle. Every single time you chose comfort over responsibility, every time you told yourself tomorrow instead of today, you were not just avoiding a task, you were avoiding the version of yourself capable of standing back up. Discipline is not about being perfect. It is about refusing to let one bad decision convince you that you are only capable of bad decisions. A person who prays late but still prays is closer to change than a person who never tries, because they are convinced trying is pointless. Momentum matters more than perfection, and momentum starts the moment you stop waiting to feel worthy before you act. Here is something almost nobody tells you, and once you hear it, you will not be able to unhear it. The people throughout history who are remembered for their closeness to the divine were rarely the ones who never fell. They were the ones who fell and got back up so many times that falling stopped being their identity and rising became it instead. Repetition builds identity, not intention. You are not defined by the mistake you made once in a moment of weakness. You are defined by what you decide to do the morning after. One night does not write your whole story, unless you let it hold the pen forever. Consider the mechanics of how habits actually form, because this matters more than most people realize when it comes to breaking free from shame. A habit, good or destructive, is built through repetition paired with emotion. Every time you repeat a sin and then punish yourself into paralysis instead of correction, you are strengthening two habits at once: the original mistake and the habit of hopelessness that follows it. But the reverse, also true. Every single time you fall and still choose to whisper a sincere apology, still choose to try again the next day, you are quietly building a new identity, one repetition at a time, whether you can feel it happening or not. Change rarely feels dramatic while it is happening. It feels like nothing, like showing up on an ordinary day when no one is watching and no one is clapping. Then one day, months later, you look back and realize the person who you used to give up so easily is gone, replaced slowly, silently, by someone steadier. I want to talk about the specific fear underneath this whole question, because what if Allah never forgives me is really asking something deeper. It is really asking, what if I am unlovable? What if there is a version of wrongdoing so severe that it disqualifies a person ever being wanted again? That fear did not start with religion. That fear likely started earlier, maybe in a childhood moment when disappointing someone felt like losing their love entirely. Maybe in a relationship where one mistake ended everything with no room for repair. You have taken that early wound and projected it onto the biggest relationship of your life, assuming the same fragile conditions apply. But conditional love is a human limitation, not a divine one. Human love often has a ceiling. Divine mercy was described across centuries, across different corners of the earth, in nearly identical language, as something that outpaces anger, something that reaches for the return of the wrongdoer before the wrongdoer even reaches back. Think about the specific image of someone traveling through a vast desert, exhausted, dehydrated, certain death is close, and they finally lose their only source of water and supplies, watching it disappear over a dune, accepting they are going to die there. Then, almost impossibly, they wake up and find it standing right beside them again. The relief in that moment is described as being so overwhelming that in their shock they misspeak entirely. Some traditions describe a person in that state accidentally saying something backwards out of sheer euphoria, so overtaken with joy their words could not keep up with their heart. That story exists to describe the level of joy that a return, a genuine return, produces on the other side. Not acceptance, overwhelming joy. If you have spent years imagining you would be met with cold disappointment, if you tried to come back, you have had the entire picture backwards. Now let's talk about the part of this that requires your participation, because hope without action becomes another form of avoidance, just a softer one. You do not get to use the vastness of mercy as a permission slip to stay stuck. That is a different trap, quieter but just as dangerous as despair. True change requires an honest inventory, not a vague feeling of regret, but a specific, unflinching look at what you actually need to stop doing and what you actually need to start doing. Vague guilt keeps you spinning in place. Specific responsibility moves you forward. Ask yourself what exactly you are avoiding correcting. Not eventually. What is the one thing, if you are honest with yourself right now, that you already know you need to change and have simply been postponing because starting feels harder than staying comfortable in the mess? There is a particular kind of person who transforms their entire life, and it is rarely the person who had the fewest mistakes to overcome. It is almost always the person who got tired of their own excuses before they got tired of trying. Something shifts internally when a person stops asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and starts asking, "What am I going to do about it now?" That shift from victim of your past to author of your future is not instant, and it is not permanent either, meaning you have to choose it again and again, sometimes daily, sometimes hourly during the hardest seasons. But every single time you choose it, the next choice becomes slightly easier, like carving a path through thick grass. The first walk through is exhausting. The 10th walk through is a trail. I want you to picture your future self for a moment, someone standing 5 years ahead of where you are right now, looking back at this exact moment, this exact video, this exact sentence you are reading. That future self already knows how this chapter ends. They know whether tonight was the night everything started to shift, or whether it became another forgotten spark that faded by morning. Here is the uncomfortable truth. That future self is being written right now, in this pause, in what you decide to do in the next 24 hours after this ends. Not month. Not after some imaginary reset date that never actually arrives. The next 4 hours. Let's talk honestly about relapse, because pretending the path forward is a straight line is one of the most damaging lies in personal growth content, and it sets people up to quit the first time they slip. Real growth looks like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and then eventually the ratio flips in your favor if you refuse to stop showing up. The people who transform are not the people who never fall again. They are the people who shorten the distance between falling and returning. Where it used to take you months to come back to yourself after a slip, it starts taking weeks, then days, then eventually the same night. That shrinking gap is the real measure of growth, far more honest than some fantasy of flawless perfection that was never realistic for any human being who has ever lived. There is a reason certain phrases stay etched in people's memory for a lifetime, phrases they heard once from a parent, a teacher, a stranger, and never forgot. Usually it is because the words arrived at the exact moment the person needed permission to stop punishing themselves. You might need that permission right now. So here it is, plainly, without decoration. You are allowed, begin again. Not because your mistakes were small, not because what you did doesn't matter, but because the door was never actually locked. You were the one standing in front of it, convinced it was, too afraid to even try the handle because you assumed you already knew the answer. Think about how differently you would treat someone else in your exact situation. If your closest friend came to you tonight, shaking, confessing the worst thing they had ever done, terrified they had ruined everything beyond repair, what would you say to them? Would you list every reason they were unworthy? Or would you remind them that the fact they are shaking, the fact that it still hurts this much, is proof their heart has not gone numb? You would probably hold them and tell them it is not over. Why is it so easy to extend that grace to someone else and nearly impossible to extend it to yourself? Somewhere along the way you learn to be your own harshest critic while being everyone else's softest landing place. It is time to reverse that, starting tonight. Purpose is going to matter here more than you might expect, because shame convinces people they no longer have the right to want anything meaningful from their life, as if consequences should include forfeiting every dream you ever had. That is not accountability, that is self-sabotage dressed up as humility. The people who make the most lasting impact on this world are rarely the ones who never struggled. They are the ones who let their struggle become the very thing that gave their purpose depth. Your darkest season does not disqualify you from a meaningful future. In many cases, it is exactly what will make you capable of reaching people that a person who never struggled could never reach, because you will actually understand what it feels like to sit exactly where they are sitting right now. Consider what discipline actually looks like on an ordinary Tuesday, not a dramatic movie moment, just an ordinary, unremarkable day. It looks like waking up tired and choosing to follow through anyway. It looks like feeling the pull toward the old pattern and choosing, in that specific charged second, to do something different, even something small. It looks like forgiving yourself for yesterday's failure without using that forgiveness as an excuse to fail again today. Small decisions repeated with consistency are the actual architecture of a transformed life. Nobody builds strength in a single dramatic moment. Strength is built in the thousands of unremarkable moments nobody else ever sees. You need to understand something about the nature of sincere regret, because it functions completely differently from the anxious spiral so many people mistake it for. Anxious spiraling keeps replaying the mistake without ever moving toward resolution. It just loops, draining energy, producing nothing but exhaustion. Sincere regret, the kind that actually creates change, has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It acknowledges what happened honestly, it commits to a specific corrective action, and then it releases the weight so the person can actually move forward and build something. If you have been stuck in the loop version for years, that is not devotion, that is a trap disguised as devotion, and recognizing the difference might be one of the most freeing realizations you have all year. Let's talk about identity, because this is where lasting change actually gets built or lost. Most people try to change their behavior first and hope their identity eventually catches up. It rarely works in that order. The people who create permanent change usually start by deciding who they are choosing to become, and then let their daily actions become evidence supporting that new identity. Instead of thinking, I am someone who keeps failing at this, try thinking, I am someone who is in the process of becoming consistent. And this is one data point, not the whole verdict. Every action either becomes evidence for your old identity or evidence for your new one. You are casting votes for who you become every single day, whether you realize it or not. There will be nights, maybe even tonight, where the old fear creeps back in, whispering the same question that started this entire conversation. What if I am forgiven? What if I try and it still isn't enough? In that moment, I want you to remember something specific and concrete rather than abstract. Remember that the door has never once been reported closed on someone who kept knocking. Every tradition, every story, every account passed down through generations about people who returned after devastating mistakes ends the same way. Not with rejection, with acceptance so complete it embarrassed the fear that told them to stay away in the first place. You get to decide, starting the moment this ends, which voice you are going to listen to for the rest of your life. The voice that keeps a scoreboard of every failure and uses it to convince you that trying is pointless, or the voice that acknowledges the mistake, takes it seriously, and still finds the courage to move forward anyway. Both voices will show up. They probably up daily. But only one of them gets to decide your direction, and that decision is entirely yours to make, over and over, for as long as you are breathing. So here is where this ends, but really, here is where something else begins. Close whatever tab, whatever app, whatever distraction is waiting for you the second this is over, and do one honest thing tonight. Not a grand gesture. Not a dramatic overhaul of your entire life by tomorrow morning. One honest, a sincere apology, whispered quietly, meant completely. One decision you have avoiding, finally made. One message sent that you have been too afraid to send. One habit interrupted tonight instead of tomorrow, because tomorrow has quietly become the place where most people's best intentions go to disappear. You are too far gone. You were never too far gone. The version of you that still aches over your mistakes is not the broken version. That is the version still capable of everything you have been afraid to hope for. Stand up. Begin again. The door was open the entire time.